Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. Today's guest is Coach Jon Beck, an educator, player development coach and consultant, former athlete at Arkansas State who prides himself on serving coaches and players daily. In our conversation today, we dive into the beauty of March Madness. We talk about how and why you should be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all, and navigating the youth sports industry and transforming the lives of young humans, young athletes to become better people. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Coach Jon. Welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. We are thrilled to have you here today. I'm excited for our conversation, touching on how we can serve coaches and players daily in a more impactful way, which leads us to our first question of the day being, what is your definition of impactful leadership, and how does impactful leadership show up in your daily work?
So that's a loaded question, of course, but I think, obviously leadership has to be done by example first and foremost. But then I think there's some major kind of pillars under that. I'll just take it kind of from my standpoint as far as leadership with maybe my clients or my kids, or if I'm coaching a new, organization or team, or I'm coaching them for a day, or whether it's for a period of time. I think number one, you have to, be able to know your stuff, because if you don't have knowledge, it's you can be all really energetic, but if you can't get to the deep details and the teaching to help players actually improve, I just don't think it matters much. So I would say the number one thing of leadership is you have to practice what you preach. And then the pillars under that, and again, we could talk on this all day, but I think you have to know your stuff and have knowledge. You have to have the ability to earn trust. And that's only done through, again, the good cliche buzzword of relationship building. But if you can't earn a player's trust, if they don't trust you, on and off the floor, then it's not going to matter. And I would say allowing players to be heard is a big part of that. Being empathetic towards their wants and needs, being able to listen really well and not just always telling. I think that's the big thing. And, a lot of people say, I just need to add value, but you got to get a little deeper than just the words add value. You have to be able to intentionally help them with what they need to become the best version of themselves. And that's different for every player. It's different for every person. And so, again, by listening and finding out, what they need and what they want, and then being able to challenge them to get to that end goal or that best version of themselves, I think that's, very important when it comes to leadership. I also think what I call the it factor is you have to be able to, have energy. You have to be able to be enthusiastic. It doesn't mean you have to be this rah-rah, but you do have to have energy. I always say, like, if you ever listen to a guest speaker, if you ever went to an exercise fitness class, you may know your stuff and you may be able to have a relationship, but if you can't get people to kind of dig deep and try to, be the best version of themselves, I think that's something that you're going to be left behind on when it comes to other people that can bring that energy. And then it comes down to, can you match their work ethic? Can you match their work ethic consistently? Because if you have a player that really wants it, and they need to spend so many hours a day or so many, hours a week to get to what they want to be, and you can't match that work ethic, there's no way you can lead them. That's very, very important trait under leadership as well. And so, again, like I said, we could talk on this all day. I'm long-winded. I can talk about it, but the ability to love, serve, and care about people deeply will obviously help that relationship as well. So those are just some pillars that I would say that leaders, must have. And then also, you have to let them kind of practice their own leadership style. I think a lot of coaches especially are like, we don't have any leaders, but you never let your players practice leadership, so you're not going to have any leaders. It's not something, there are some traits that, you're kind of born with, and and that kids kind of develop from their parents and their own home culture. But at the same time, we can let them practice leadership skills, which will help them become more of a leader. That's a long answer, I hope, but
yeah, no, it's awesome. There is a lot to unpack there. So I think, kind of almost summarizing, number one is you got to be competent in your knowledge of the game, like whether it's basketball or you're teaching math or anything. You got to be competent in the subject that you are teaching or coaching. Two, you have to earn the trust, and I want to dive into that a little bit more. Earn the trust of players. The buzzword relationship building, making sure we're hearing our players to help them become better versions of themselves, bringing the energy in in a way that's authentic to obviously yourself. Some people are probably more rah, like I kind of identify with the Sean McVay running down the sidelines and, high-fiving my players, but I know there are some more reserved coaches as well that are just as effective and transformational. And then that work ethic and matching that work ethic of your players and continuing to push them. But I want to, step a little bit back and talk about earning the trust of our, the players that you're coaching and teaching. And I think it's the most important thing. And I do believe part of it starts with that competence, right? If you're not competent, I think they're going to smell and see right through it. And that's like a big way to lose trust, like right away. But I'm curious, like, what are some of your other thoughts on really just building that trust?
Well, to build trust, it takes really knowing what makes them tick. And again, I think the only way that happens is, over time. It's not something that you're going to be able just to kind of walk into and get them to buy in. It takes a lot of time. I mean, there's so many different books that talk about it takes 15 different interactions, 15 to 25 different interactions for a person to finally actually maybe start to trust you a little bit. And so those are the kind of things that, again, you just start to see what motivates people and what kind of learning style, they have, and what kind of, buttons to push to maybe motivate them in certain, endeavors. And every player is different. Every person's different. But I think those are the things that, are really big when it comes to just initially starting to understand that person, is just spending a lot of time with them off the floor, not necessarily, on the floor, or, you find out more about a player, what they want out of sports off of, not talking about sports as you do talking about sports. And so, sorry about that. I should turn my things off, but I forgot to. But I hope that helps answer that question a little bit as far as starting to build, that relationship and that trust.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's really important to ask those questions with basketball, right? Like, how is school, right? What do you like to do outside of basketball? Like, actually starting to recognize them as a human, because I think sometimes as coaches we can get stuck in like this is when they show up here, this is what they do, when they're a basketball player, right? But they are more than a basketball player. And with that, we want to make sure that we're hearing them out. I'm curious if you could share like a story or an experience that you had where you were able to like kind of practice this, because I think sometimes as coaches, like, we can hear different things, but the power of story really gives a vivid image of, okay, this is how I start to notice, this is how I actively listen.
Well, I mean, again, it's just all the little things. When I have players, you see, something like from the NCAA tournament yesterday, one of their teams gets a win, and you just send them a simple text that says, "Oh man, y'all are still rolling." I mean, anything that relates to them, where they're thinking, they're like, "Man, coach really cared." Like he doesn't just care about the ball or just about the practice. Those little things. Even if let's say you got a kid who, there's a kid yesterday, for instance, that they love Kentucky. And of course, Kentucky suffered a heartbreaking loss yesterday in the first round. And, you don't want to push his button and say, "Oh man, Kentucky, what about Kentucky?" But you just say, "Man, I'm sorry about Kentucky, man. I know that hurts, but hey, they're going to be loaded next year, whatever." But it's just those little things that, and again, you could do thousands of stories, thousands of different players, but whether it's a family member, "Hey, I saw where your sisters, made the all-conference volleyball team," or, "Hey, I saw where your mom on Facebook, I'm friends with your mom, and I saw where she's, celebrating the anniversary. That's really cool." Anything that where you can just share those life moments. And again, it has nothing to do with basketball necessarily. Obviously, you want to celebrate all those, awards and things like that as well. But I think it's just all the other stuff. Hey, I know your spring break's coming up and you're going to vacation, man. Hey, let me know what it's like. Send me a cool, send me a cool picture. Send me a video of you doing something fun or whatever. But just again, relationships, checking in on other people, not just going through the whole day and you're like, I didn't talk to anybody today. I didn't check on anybody. I didn't text another player. Those little, touches, if you will, over time build up. And that's what relationships is just not, hey, coach only checks on me if it's basketball related, or he only really cares if it's to do with my performance, or it's just all those little life moments that you want to check up on. And that's in the essence what relationships are.
Yeah, it's more than a game, right? You're building like those real human relationships that bring about like real change, like in the game of life, not just the game of basketball. And I'm curious where you like learned this from. Did you have like a coach that led the way? Is it like listening and just experience? Like, how did you kind of come about like this kind of mindset, this approach towards building relationships with players?
Well, I think just over time with practice, as you're a young coach, you take this such a serious, and you have this, you want to have energy and enthusiasm. But I think over time you learn. Me personally, I always knew, just because I'm the opposite of the terrible youth sports parents that you hear about. I had the opposite of those parents. I was so fortunate because I had a mom and dad who didn't care anything about sports. They weren't just necessarily like big time sports people. Their lives didn't revolve around sports. It wasn't like we had to watch every game of everything. There were some times but my dad wasn't this, huge football fan. Like every Sunday you got to watch every game. It was just, they cared about other things, that it was just more important than just sports. And I grew up with friends who had parents who's like, oh my gosh, that's all they think about. That's all they care about. And that's okay. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I just had those parents that cared about a lot of other things and cared about the journey and am I coachable? Am I making great grades? Am I being respectful to teachers and respectful to elders? And, my grandparents were the same way. They were coaches. And so I just learned those values, I think personally at a young age of it is, more than a game, and it's about, your attitude and about your character more than it is about your performance. And so I was very blessed when it comes to that, because now working, within youth sports as well as, all other levels, all the way up to professional level, you see some of these parents and man, it's a disaster. It's a nightmare. It's just disheartening to watch. And it's disheartening to be involved with those players and see the pressure that their parents put on them and have to deal with those things. And so, I think as far as, me personally, that's what I would go with. And then obviously as you coach and you gain experience, you start to realize that, those are not what makes player, especially in today's age, that's just not what motivates players. It's more of a relationship and not the screaming and yelling and the energy and the stuff that motivates players. It's more of the relationship of, are you really trying to help me on and off the floor? I think those are very important.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I actually share a very similar sentiment about like my childhood of playing sports. Like my best memories are, playing middle school basketball, going to camps, right? Having all those great coaches and those, I wasn't like thinking when I was 13, wow, these coaches are building relationships with me and really care, right? But like when I think back to it, I think, okay, they did. They really cared about me. They were always asking questions. They were positive coaches, and I want to be like that, and I want to continue to kind of grow and have that growth mindset and become a better coach, and then obviously pass the baton, bridge the impact, so to speak, of making a difference. And as I'm now, coaching here in LA, it's a little more, I'm from a small town as well. I share that same sentiment. And so a lot of people are a little bit nicer, I feel like, in small towns, maybe not all small towns, but where I was from. And now I'm here in LA, big city, and a lot of, and a lot of parents, individualize their kids and have trainers at like, 3-4 years old, like so young, and are just like so serious about their development. I'm like, let's just let them rock, let them be kids. I'm curious, what's your kind of approach with navigating some of these like parent relationships and in the development of players?
Oh, it's what you just said. It's amazing. I have just yesterday out and say, "Do you work with 5-year-olds?" And I was like, I can, but you don't need to work with a 5-year-old. I mean, what do you want me to do? I just want you to take them through workouts. And I'm just amazed because I think about myself, at 5 years old, and I didn't even play basketball until the sixth grade capacity. I mean, not even with my friends for fun. I played a lot of other sports, and then ultimately I ended up playing in college in Division I basketball, playing basketball. But before then, it was just how many times, you're playing outside with your friends, you're doing every different. I literally played every sport you could think. I even swam competitively until I was 16 years old. So I played soccer, baseball, basketball, football, anything that you could play outside. My grandmother's a high school volleyball coach, and so I played volleyball. But yeah, these kids now, are wanting to get training at 5, 6, 7 years old, and I just, again, I think you're going to have a lot of problems down the road with burnout, with injuries, with, they're trying to specialize. You're trying to instead it should just be about fun and have as many different experiences for those kids as possible, play as many different sports as you could possibly play, be around as many different sports as you could be around, and have a lot of fun. And then naturally, once you get up into that, maybe 7th, 8th grade range, we can start to say, let's get a little bit of a training maybe. I don't want to put a certain grade on it, but if I was a parent, that would be the grade at which I would start to maybe say, hey, maybe we could get you a little additional training that would maybe help you build your confidence and build your skills, because you're really starting to gravitate towards maybe a couple sports and you've kind of put away a few of the others. But that would be, not until the 7th or 8th grade. I would take more of a, kind of a European approach when it comes to, skill work and things like that. I think in, the American model, it's just bad. We got kids specializing in 2nd grade and doing AAU tournaments. And I think there's a lot of problems, and so that's how I would answer that. If there was a direct question there, ask it again and I'll just try to directly go to it. But
no, that's perfect. I think that's exactly kind of what I was wanting to touch on. And I'm, it's amazing to me because I had like maybe a couple months ago, I had a scuffle between parents, and they were 4 and 5 years old, right? It's just like, it's not that serious. I mean, they're 4 and 5 years old. Just let them rock. Like at that age, like I'm right now, I'm learning in a class. I'm learning about like at that age, they should just be learning motor skills. So I'm like trying to have them just kind of move around and like feel what it's like to move around, like patting the basketball. Like it's all fun for them. I try and use different animal terms, right, for them, because that at that age, like if I'm listening to them, that's where they're going to be at, right? You got to meet them where they're at. And you talked a little bit about meeting players where they're at. I'm curious, like, what's your philosophy? Say a kid comes to you, they're 16 years old, and how do you evaluate them? How do you meet them where they're at? Obviously it takes time, right? Like I think, we've kind of touched on this, like building those relationships takes time. You can't do it in one day, can't do it in 2, can't do it in 3. It takes probably 15 to 20.
Yeah. So you talking about just how to maybe, like, if I have a player, like, give me an example. Like you got a 16-year-old come to you, and you're just wanting to try to maybe help them with their skills and their game.
With their skills, overall game. How do you meet them where they're at?
Yeah.
Like, what's your approach there?
Number one, you don't, you would rather just lock in a few things and try to get really good. But you always want to have that conversation too and talk to them about, what's really important to you. What do you really want to work on? What do you feel like, obviously, their body style, their, how athletic they are, their genetics, play a role to kind of what's going to fit their game. But it's not necessarily about a certain, prescription. It's more just, let's pick a couple things and get really good at them before we move on to other things. I think a lot of players want to try to get good at all this different stuff. And then again, you would say, okay, well, when you do play, what are your strengths? And they usually can tell you, well, I'm pretty good at this, I'm pretty good at that. And then you could say, okay, well, what do you not feel very comfortable at? And even more importantly, as far as maybe feeling comfortable, what do you feel like you won't play because of, which I call that's a threat. And so if kids are great about, they're smart and they know, man, I can't handle the ball very well at all. And when people start pressuring me, I turn the thing over. And so, obviously that's something you'll have to attack first and try to really get them, comfortable with their footwork and being able to, handle the ball and being able to manipulate the ball and handle the ball against pressure. So, I think picking a few things that are threats and really locking in on those, and then picking a few things that are strengths and locking in on those. And that's why, we would start there with a player on the floor.
Nice. Yeah. On the floor. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And off the floor, same thing. It's, how confident do you feel? You get some kids and they're just like the most confident. I mean, they're super confident. Like they don't mind talking. And then you get some kids that are, they're very unconfident. They're shy and it takes time again to find out if that's just the overall, shyness that's coming out at first, or if it's something that's real. But, again, it's all connected. So the off the floor stuff is just as important as trying to help them with as the on the floor stuff.
Right. Which goes perfectly with like knowing your player off and on the court. Cause it definitely, like, I feel like, I don't know, especially with COVID, like I've been working a lot with youth in the last couple of years, and over the last 5 years, I've worked with youth. But I think like you're even touching on something right now where it's like sports, you get social skills from, right? Which is the one of the benefits from like playing multiple sports up until 7th, 8th grade or high school, whenever you start to maybe specialize in practicing those social skills where you're working on a team. And with Zoom and they spend so much time online, right? Like I've noticed the social anxiety has gone up quite a bit, especially in middle schoolers, right? When I'm working with middle schoolers or even high schoolers. So I think that's a really important part of sports and developing those social skills. But I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and touch on something that you talked about a little bit earlier, was about like young coaches. And I want to talk about a little bit about what young coaches like myself, like what do we normally make mistakes on? I can probably go right away. I'm on the side of I think I'm a little too friendly as a player's coach. And I've had a little bit of a transition right now where I'm working on like just being like the adult in the room, but just like, what are some common mistakes that young coaches make?
Well, a million, but just the ones that jump out. And I was that young coach as well, so I understand it. Number one, I think ego. I think you know it all. I think that you have no idea how deep a level of teaching there is out there. I was a young coach and I had college experience. I have high school experience, AAU experience. And then you go out and you meet, professional players and trainers that work with professional players, and you realize I didn't know half of, what I thought I knew. There's a deeper level of teaching out there. And so, you have to let the ego down to be able to, accept that. There's a deeper level. There's people that know a heck of a lot more than you would ever know. And I think, we're so young coaches are usually they're sold on, they just believe what they've been taught by somebody else, what they've seen and what they've done for so long is that's the way, this is what works. And then you start looking at science and the knowledge of, the people that actually do know, and the people that, are the best in the world at doing that. And, you realize that what you're doing is not beneficial in any capacity, much less, really good. So a lot of people think it's really good. And I watch high school practices, I watch college practices, and I'm literally at some of these practices saying nothing that you're doing is actually going to help game transfer. It's going to help a player get better. And so I think just knowing that there's such a deeper level that you have to drop your ego and that you have to try to be a learn-it-all instead of a know-it-all. I think that's where you could start, and it just jumps out. And then I think, there are so many mentors out there that young coaches, instead of just thinking they know it all, is you have so many resources to learn, but you also can seek out, really good mentors. Not because so-and-so's a good coach up the street, but I'm talking about social media allows you to, talk to, just like right now, where I'm sitting here in Arkansas and you're in California and we're in a different time zone, but we can talk and share ideas. I mean, I've got NBA coaches that call me. I have international coaches that have dealt with the NBA and from Australia that call me in a totally different time zone, and we can sit there and talk and share ideas and talk basketball. And so I think, dropping the ego, understand that you don't know it all and you have a lot to learn, especially as a young coach. And then, seeking great mentors. I think that's something that obviously those three are big and jump out. And what you just said too is, I think, learning from other coaches, you learn. It is different as far as the players go. You just don't want it to be, and again, it's all here. We can say, well, this player's this coach is a player friendly coach and all that. I don't think there's a certain ratio, but yeah, you want to make it where you're friendly, but you're not necessarily, their best friend, if you will. You have to have a relationship where, look, I'm the coach. I'm the one that's going to try to hold you accountable to things. And it's not going to always be what you want to hear. Yes, you definitely want to be their friend and you want to be friendly, but there is a fine line there. And I think young coaches sometimes, don't understand that line. And it may not be their fault. It may be a parent thing. I think at some point we quit parenting, right? I mean, I think you've heard that analogy of, when do we start being our kids' friends and not their parent, which is the one that holds them accountable? So I think that's a great kind of comparison as far as that coach is, yeah, we want to be friendly and we love our kids, but at the same time, like, I'm the parent and I have to hold you accountable to rules, to guidelines, to not cross this, boundary that we have. And if you cross that, I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to care for you, but I'm also going to, deal out that punishment or that reprimand or whatever that is. And so, teaching life skills as a parent or as a coach, those are all kind of correlate.
Yeah. So I as I hear you, honestly, I think accountability is a big piece, right? But I kind of like the idea of being a learn-it-all instead of a know-it-all. That might be the title of this episode, right? Like, I think that's really cool, and I think that's something that I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to learn it all, because honestly, I was in an interview the other day, and I had no idea what half the things they were saying, like basketball-wise. Like, I knew going in, like, I'm still young, right? Like, there's just so much out there for me to learn. I didn't play college basketball too, which, there's probably another layer of knowledge that I didn't quite receive, but I recognize that I still need to learn a lot of it and be a learn it all.
And that's best of the best is they'll be going to their grave. Like, I still could have been learning more. And that's the thing. That are really good at what they do, they have that mindset. It's a growth mindset of, I constantly have to learn, and I constantly have to tweak and adjust my ways. It's never like, oh, this is what's worked. It's you're constantly seeking better ways. Those are the best of the best. And so I even had that on my Twitter handle. It's learn it all, because it's constantly reinforcing that I have so much to learn. And I always tell people, I've been on a lot of podcasts. I'm talking about a lot, but I listen to way more than I'm on. And I'll continue to listen, regardless if I never am on another podcast again. I will listen to podcasts on the daily. I mean, it's a daily thing for me. When I drive, I listen to them. But I'm trying to listen to other people, trying to find ways to help me better serve the people that I'm in contact with. And you only do that by having a very open mind and being able to be receptive to my ways, not always the right way. There are so many different ways to skin a cat, right? There's so many different ways for coaches to win games and philosophies, but you want to constantly steal and take from other great people, other great coaches, and that helps you make your own philosophy, which again helps your players. But that never gets to a point where it just stops and you're set. The growth mindset of constantly being a lifelong learner, I'm telling you, you read every book about people that are highly successful, and almost every one of them across the board is a lifelong learner, and they constantly can adjust and evaluate themselves and change. And so that's what I try to do.
Yeah, being a lifelong learner is so important. And I'm curious, who are some of the biggest influences for you? What are the podcasts you listen to most? I think we both have a mutual interest. I know you were on the Coach Forward podcast with Coach Jason, which I have found to be incredibly helpful for me. I listen to Hardwood Hustle by the PGC basketball. I'm always trying to learn and hear more resources, and I'm sure those that are listening are as well.
Yeah, there are so many. And of course you can search the top ones. But I have ones that aren't even basketball related. I mean, there's so many. I mean, Tim Ferriss, there are just, hundreds of different ones. Now, in my, business, in the training industry, I try to listen to as many basketball trainers as I can. It helps me with my, with my clients, and helps me with my professional players. It helps me with my college players. So I'm trying to always, study the European game. I'm trying to study, the college game, the high school game. They're all almost different sports, if you will. And so you try to, learn from the best, not just here in the United States, but globally, and look at, different resources that will help you become, again, the better version to help you better serve your players. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I go with that, is just constantly being a lifelong learner, constantly trying to find ways to, better help your players. As far as, I could give you, 10 different ones, but again, just search, try to find out whatever it is that you're trying to learn about, and learn. And it's not just, it's books, it's podcasts, it's interviews, it's YouTube, tutorials. And there's a million different ways, so many resources, as opposed to when I was in high school, you had to, maybe read a book or see a picture on a magazine and then try to go mimic that or record. I was from Missouri, and I was actually, to kind of date myself, I was obviously a Michael Jordan fan, but St. Louis University started recruiting me when I was in high school, and Larry Hughes, which was an NBA player, played with LeBron in Cleveland, and he was a big time, guard that was athletic, handled the ball, and was kind of dynamic with his footwork and his ball handling. And so I would literally record every game on SportsCenter, every little clip, every St. Louis game that was on TV. I would VHS, record that, and then try to go and mimic those things. And now players you have so many resources to better yourself as a player, as a coach, as a parent, whatever you want to do. I can promise you there's somebody out there that's made a YouTube video about it. There's a podcast about it. There's a TV show about it, a documentary about it. And so just, again, lifelong learning, you should be taking, every resource that becomes available. You have to do some homework and search those things out. But gosh, there's so much to learn, so much knowledge.
Yeah, there is so much knowledge. And honestly, sometimes I think I'm almost curious, like, how do you filter out the knowledge? How do you keep what works for you? Like, is it just like, you're like, I'm going to add this, right? Because you probably listen to quite a bit of things. And I think as someone that's very impressionable like myself, I think I used to take everything literally and try and take everything of everyone's. But for me, it's kind of been a journey of, I got to pick this from this person, and then kind of culminate it. Is that how you do it? Is you try and, like, make your own recipe, your own playbook, essentially?
Yeah, I think that's what all great coaches do, is they steal bits and pieces that kind of fit their personality and fit, their upbringing and the way they were. But again, I think that can change if you have an open mind. I think it doesn't change when you don't have an open mind. If you can keep an open mind, and then again, all great coaches, all great parents, they're always, receptive to new ideas, and you steal. And you take and you say, well, that part I don't necessarily like, but that part that he said I really like. And you try to incorporate that, again, becomes your own philosophy. And so, there is no certain. You look at all the different coaches, these great coaches that have won, right? Well, if you do your research, like the NCAA tournament, for instance, that's going on right now, in the last 15 years, you're talking about some of the greatest coaches, Izzo and Calipari and Mike Krzyzewski. They've had first round exits. We're talking about multiple 2 and 3 and 4. Some of these coaches that have been really good, they've won a lot of games, but they've also lost a lot of big games to people they shouldn't have lost to. And so again, they all have different philosophies, right? Every single one of them, all these NCAA coaches. And that's what's so great about, sports, and about things in general is there's a million different ways to do it. And so there's no, blueprint. There's no black and white. Life is a gray area. And, that's what's great about coaches is they can build their own philosophy and it can impact their players and they can go and they can be successful or unsuccessful.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, or unsuccessful. It depends on the philosophy you build, right? And if you're, if you're learn it all and continue learning. On that topic of March Madness, right? Like, what excites you about March Madness? What's like the most fun thing for you, especially as a trainer? You probably see that, of course, you got guys and the people that you train like playing in the tournament, which is probably awesome. But what else like excites you about March Madness?
Well, I mean, the cliche underdogs. I mean, the cliche answer is underdog because I mean, when you see St. Peter's, you're seeing stuff online saying, Calipari makes $10 million a year. This coach is making, $100,000, and this is they play in, and it seats 2,000 people, and here's Rupp at 22,000 people, and so you get all these things. I just said, St. Peter's, St. Mary's, St. Patrick's Day. That's kind of the Facebook post I made earlier, and again, you can call it luck or you can call it whatever, but none of it matters. The rankings don't matter. There's been a lot of social media stuff about the rankings lately, and you're ranking these, you're ranking 7th, 8th graders, and you're ranking these high school players, and this kid's 95, and this kid's 100, and then none of that matters when that ball is thrown up. And it definitely doesn't matter in March, because these teams that necessarily shouldn't be there, or there's no way they're going to be able to beat this. I mean, I saw Charles Barkley said there's nobody at St. Peter's, that's ever recruited by Kentucky. And St. Peter's doesn't have any McDonald's All-Americans. They got a bunch of guys that eat at McDonald's, but they don't have any McDonald's All-Americans, right? And so, but then you go and you throw that ball up, and it's hey, we have to execute in the half court. We have to, get stops, in the half court. And so, again, I think that's the most fun part is obviously I just like watching great basketball, the overtime games, the close games, the games that some people say give me anxiety. I love those games. That's the opposite. What gives me anxiety is when you watch bad basketball and it's a 30-point blowout. Now, what does give me anxiety, and again, I've been fortunate enough to be around some of the greatest minds in basketball and see it played at the highest level and see it coached at the highest level, but the spacing – it's hard to watch college basketball. It's hard to watch high school basketball because of the spacing and because of the way they, clog up the paint and just, watching international basketball and being able to, run multiple actions and being able to guard multiple actions in the way the college game is. That's tough to watch. So that would be my kind of the flip side of what's most exciting. The underdogs and the close games. The flip side of is the spacing in the college game. Oh, it's hard to watch.
Yeah, no, we definitely love the underdogs and the stories, but I'm curious, if you could touch on it, because I have a coworker that says a similar thing about especially the spacing in high school and college. And do you think that's an American thing? Because you talked about, European, or is it just kind of like a younger athlete thing in terms of spacing, and it takes a little bit longer to learn?
I think it takes time. I think, usually the NBA, it starts to, they have certain actions and certain things they do in the European games the same way. European game is almost probably ahead as far as, the actions that they run, and that kind of carries over. A lot of NBA coaches will take ideas from the European, models and games, and it trickles down. It takes a few years to get to college and it takes a few years to get to high school. But you look at the kind of the evolution of basketball and how it used to be played and how now it's the opposite of how it used to be played, right? It used to be like, let's clog up the paint, let's go high-low and get it inside. And now it's space the floor, drive and kick. You have to have extreme spacing and maybe, an action where we bring 2 to the ball and you're just basically trying to get dominoes and somebody to have to help too much, or basically get a 5-on-4, a 4-on-3 advantage, and then just keep trying to make those advantages just counter over and over again. And then finally, you get a great shot. Usually it's going to be a 3 in today's game. So that's totally different. When I grew up, you watched Michael Jordan just dominate in the kind of, mid and low post area and just being able to back down and fade away. And you watch these big dominant centers, just punish people down. And it's the opposite, in today's game.
Yes, the evolution of basketball, evolution of life, I guess, right? And so as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, I know you kind of gave some advice to young coaches. So I'm curious, I'll flip the question a little bit. As a learner, as someone who started coaching at a young age, what are the biggest things that you learned in the past X amount of years that you've been coaching? And how can people find you and learn and connect with you and learn more about you and get your content, your resources?
Well, you can follow me at Coach Jon Beck on Twitter, Coach Jon Beck on Facebook. I don't have any of the other stuff. I don't have Instagram. I know I don't have TikTok. I don't have any of that stuff. And that's, maybe I'll get that one day. I never say never, but as of right now, I'm not doing any of that stuff. My advice would be, again, I would just go back to learning as much as you possibly can, seeking out great mentors, going and doing internships, not just seeking them out, over a Zoom call or over a conversation, but going and living. I think going out and working with Pure Sweat Basketball and that internship that I did that we talked about, where I went out to LA and lived there. You just don't get that, and not just going out there and seeing a guy work for a couple of days, but actually going and living there and being a part of that day after day, week after week, month after month, and seeing what it actually takes and the level of teaching. Again, that's kind of what allowed me to do what I do now. Without that, I always kind of wanted to do it, but I think going and actually doing it and living it, is something that kind of changed the way I think and the way I do things. And so, I think your development as a coach will help you in every area of your life. So when you're developing and you're thinking about, learning as much as you can, don't just think of it as I'm going to learn to help my kids. Think of it as this is going to help me, be the best spouse, parent, coworker, leader in my community, teacher. I think, again, that lifelong learning and just being able to listen and jot down ideas, just like, you're jotting down things. It's the same thing that I do. I got note cards all over my place, in my car, it's one of those things that you do if you want to constantly learn, and go back and look and evaluate and just be able to write those things down. That's going to help you so much. And it's going to help you in every different sector of your life, not just in what you do as far as, the way you earn income or if you're, a teacher or a coach or whatever. It's going to help you in everything in your life. And then, just being able to build great habits. I think we all can do better. James Clear has a great book, Atomic Habits, where you just, the importance of building great habits and having habit building. Those are the things that I would say, as far as, coaches is having routines, having habits, because once you can have those great habits, again, it's going to help you be the best version of yourself. The bad habits, the bad routines are going to make you, obviously it's all connected. And so that's going to take things south rather quickly.
Being a learner, having good habits, and seeking out the mentorship and living it. I think that's wonderful advice. Honestly, it's a big thing for me, right? Like I've thought about coaching before, but there's nothing more about, you can't learn about coaching unless you actually throw yourself in the fire and do it. So I loved our conversation today, Coach Jon. I appreciate it, and look forward to connecting soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward and make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.